He was the king of the city, the man who had everything. And tonight, at the Metropolitan Legacy Gala, he was going to show the world his new life, standing beside his beautiful new mistress. His ex-wife? She was a forgotten chapter, a boring recluse he'd cast aside. But he forgot one critical detail. He forgot who her father was. Tonight wasn't his coronation. It was his execution. And the woman he humiliated was about to walk in, holding the gavel. Stay with us as we unravel the story of how one man's arrogance led to the most public downfall of the decade. The penthouse apartment felt like it was floating. From the 88th floor, the city was a diamond carpet laid out for the man who believed he'd woven it. Damien Vance adjusted the bespoke silk tie on his Brioni tuxedo. He was, by every metric, a masterpiece of his own creation. It's almost too perfect, isn't it? The voice, honeyed and sharp, belonged to Chloe Jenkins. She emerged from the bedroom, a vision in crimson sequins. The dress was audacious, designed to be seen, to be photographed, to scream new. Damien's eyes swept over her. She was an asset, a stunning, perfectly polished upgrade. It's exactly what we deserve, Chloe. The car is downstairs. We're late, but not too late. Let them wait. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, swirling a glass of Macallan 30. His reflection stared back, sharp jaw, cold blue eyes, a conqueror's smile. Tonight was his apex. The Vance Innovations logo was blazing on a building 20 blocks south, a company he'd built from nothing. Well, not nothing, but that was a detail he'd long since erased from his personal history. "Are you thinking about her?" Chloe asked, her voice dipping with a practiced, feline jealousy. She wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against the expensive wool of his jacket. Damien let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Daisy? God, no. I was just admiring the view." He turned, cupping Chloe's chin. "I'm thinking about the Forbes cover. Damien Vance, the man who tamed Silicon Alley. I'm thinking about how, after tonight, the merger with Apex Dynamics is finalized. We're not just millionaires, kitten. We're dynasty." Daisy. The name felt like ash in his mouth. Daisy Hayes, his ex-wife. She was old money, a Pendleton. But the Pendletons were dinosaurs, quiet, stuffy, allergic to the press. Daisy had been the perfect, boring, supportive wife. She ran charities, hosted tasteful, dull dinners, and never once understood the hunger that drove him. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. It was messy, only because Daisy had, in his opinion, been stubborn. She'd fought him on the settlement, not on the money. She had her own trust fund, some dusty inheritance, but on the company. "Vance Innovations was our dream, Damien," she'd said, her voice trembling in the lawyer's office. "No, Daisy," he'd countered, his voice like ice. "It was my dream. You were just present. You don't build an empire by being nice. You build it by being ruthless. Something you'd never understand." He'd finally bought her out, or so he told the world. He'd given her the dull brownstone on the Upper East Side and a lump sum he considered generous, just to get her signature and be done with it. He needed to be free, to soar. And Daisy, with her quiet virtues and her moral compass, was an anchor. Chloe was a rocket. She was a 28-year-old marketing VP from his own company, and she understood brand. She understood power. "And the necklace?" Chloe prompted, touching her bare throat. Damien smiled. This was the pièce de résistance. He opened a velvet box from Bulgari. Inside, nestled on black silk, was a cascade of sapphires and diamonds. It wasn't just a necklace. It was a statement. "Damien, it's the Vance star," she breathed, her eyes wide. "I had it commissioned," he lied smoothly. "A new gem for a new era." He fastened it around her neck. It looked magnificent, a spray of blue fire against her skin. It was also, technically, a lie. It wasn't commissioned. It had been in the Vanus family vault, or rather, the vault he now controlled. It had belonged to Daisy's grandmother, a Pendleton heirloom. Daisy had worn it once, years ago, and he'd told her it looked too ostentatious. On Chloe, it looked like a trophy. "It's perfect," Chloe whispered, kissing him hard. "Everyone will know I'm the one who truly matters." "Everyone already knows," Damien said, grabbing his coat. "Tonight we're just making it official. Let Daisy stay home and knit, or whatever it is she does. The future belongs to us." He stepped into the private elevator, Chloe on his arm, the sapphires blazing. He felt invincible. He had the company, he had the new woman, and he was about to be crowned the King of New York at the Metropolitan Legacy Gala. He'd taken everything he wanted, and he'd left the past in the dust. He never once thought to look back to see what was gaining on him. 3 miles away, in the dull brownstone Damien had so generously given her, Daisy Hayes was not knitting. The house was silent, but it was the silence of a command center, not a tomb. The air was charged with a tension that had been building for 364 days. Daisy stood in front of a full-length mirror. She was not the woman Damien remembered. The mousy brown hair he'd always suggested she do something with was gone, replaced by a sleek, strategic cut that framed her face, highlighting cheekbones he'd never paid attention to. Her dress was the antithesis of Chloe's. It was a custom Schiaparelli, midnight blue silk that looked like liquid shadow. It had no sequins, no gaudy jewels. Its only adornment was a single, intricate clasp of platinum and onyx at her shoulder. It was the dress of a woman who owned the room, not one who needed to rent its attention. "Are you sure, Daisy?" The voice came from the doorway. Arthur Pendleton, her father. To the world, Arthur Pendleton was a ghost. He was old money, as Damien had so dismissively put it. But Damien, in his arrogant sprint to the top, had never bothered to read the history books. The Pendletons weren't just old money. They were the source. They didn't just own buildings. They owned the land the buildings stood on. They didn't just invest in companies. They held the debt of the banks that funded those companies. Arthur Pendleton was a small, quiet man in his late 60s, with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. He looked at his daughter, his only child, and his heart ached. "He doesn't deserve this, Father," Daisy said, her voice quiet but vibrating with annealed steel. "He deserves worse." "What he deserves is irrelevance," Arthur said, walking into the room. "What you are planning tonight. This is theater. It's loud." "It has to be loud," Daisy said, turning to face him. "He didn't just betray me, Father. He humiliated me. He told me I was nothing. He told me my entire life was a quaint little hobby, while he, the visionary, did the real work. He built his entire empire with our money, all while telling me I was a burden." The flashbacks were sharp, no longer blurred by tears. The discovery. Not a text message, not a lipstick stain. It was a wire transfer, a $500,000 bonus to Chloe Jenkins, classified under Executive Discretionary Fund. Daisy, who still at that point reviewed the company's quarterly audits, a habit Damien found adorable and meddling, had flagged it. When she'd confronted him, he hadn't even bothered to lie. "We're in love, Daisy. It just happened. She sees me for who I am. She inspires me. You're a wonderful woman. But you're a footnote. I'm writing an epic." The divorce. He'd been brutal. He'd used her quiet nature against her, painting her as depressive, unsupportive, a ball and chain on his genius. He'd wanted everything. He'd wanted Vance Innovations, free and clear. "You'll never win, Daisy," he'd sneered in their final mediation. "The board is loyal to me. The press loves me. You are Mrs. Nobody." What Damien didn't know was that Vance Innovations was never his. The seed money, the $20 million he'd so casually referred to as being from Daisy's trust fund. It hadn't been a gift. It hadn't even been from her trust. It had been an investment, drawn from a specialized holding company Daisy had established when she was 25, Hayes Pendleton Strategic Ventures. Daisy had been the one to identify Damien, then a brilliant but broke engineer, as a high-risk, high-reward investment. Her father had warned her. "Never mix business with the heart, Daisy, especially not with a man that hungry. He'll eat you alive." "He just needs a chance, Father. I believe in him." She had believed in him. She'd loved him. And because she loved him, she'd let him believe the Vance Innovations narrative. She'd let him believe he was the sole founder, the CEO, the visionary. She'd stayed in the background, the silent primary investor. The contract he'd signed 10 years ago, the one he'd probably never read past the 20 million figure, was ironclad. It was a standard Pendleton agreement. It contained, as all their personal investments did, a morality clause. Clause 12B. A breach of marital fidelity and public conduct that brought disrepute upon the primary investor, Daisy, would trigger an immediate default, allowing Hayes Pendleton to call the note, or more devastatingly, to execute a full asset conversion. "Marcus Croft filed the conversion papers an hour ago," Daisy said, checking her watch. "As of 5 p.m. Eastern, Apex Dynamics, which, as you know, we bought last year through a shell in Switzerland, has successfully merged with Vance Innovations." "A merger he orchestrated," Arthur noted, a rare, thin smile playing on his lips. "He was so proud of it," Daisy said, a flicker of the old pain surfacing. "He thought he was outsmarting the market, acquiring a smaller, agile tech firm. He was so desperate to prove he was a deal-maker. He never once stopped to ask who owned Apex. He just saw a bargain. And in his desperation," Arthur continued, "he signed over 51% of Vance Innovations' controlling shares to Apex, to us, in exchange for their next-gen AI platform, a platform our engineers developed last month." "He didn't buy a company, Father," Daisy said, picking up her small onyx clutch. "He signed his own confession. He leveraged his entire company, the one he thought he owned, to buy a piece of technology we already owned, using shares that were secured by my original investment. It's beautiful, Daisy, a perfect closed loop. He's a CEO with no company," Daisy said, "a king with no kingdom. He just doesn't know it yet. He thinks tonight is his coronation." "And the necklace?" Arthur asked, his eyes hardening. "The Persephone sapphire, my mother's necklace." Daisy's hand clenched around her clutch. "He gave it to her. It's on her neck right now. I saw the pre-Gala photos on page 6. I could have him arrested for theft, Daisy. That is a registered piece." "No," Daisy said. Her voice was ice. "That's a private matter. It needs a public solution. He wants to be the center of attention. We'll give him the show of a lifetime." Arthur nodded, offering his arm. "Then let's not be late. You have a company to announce." "And a message to deliver," Daisy said, walking with her father out of the house she'd been a prisoner in, and toward the car that would take her to her freedom. The Metropolitan Legacy Gala was in full swing. The ballroom at the Pierre Hotel was a sea of glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos. The air hummed with the sound of 1,000 conversations, all centered on money, power, and art. Damien and Chloe's arrival had been exactly what he'd paid his PR team for. The moment they stepped onto the red carpet, a frenzy of flashbulbs had erupted. Chloe, preening like a starlet, had tilted her head just so, ensuring the Vance star necklace was the focal point of every shot. "Mr. Vance! Mr. Vance! Is this the official debut?" shouted a reporter from the Times. "Tonight is about the future," Damien had replied, his voice smooth and practiced. "The future of philanthropy, and the future of Vance innovations." "And this is Miss Jenkins." "This is Chloe," Damien said, squeezing her hand. "She's the inspiration behind it all." Inside, they were the gravitational center of the room. Board members, city councilmen, even a few tech rivals clapped Damien on the back, congratulating him on the Apex Dynamics merger. "It's a coup, Damien, a pure coup," said Michael Sterling, a rival CEO. "None of us even knew Apex was in play. You poached them right from under our noses." Damien laughed, accepting a glass of champagne. "You can't wait for opportunity to knock, Michael. You have to build the door." Chloe, meanwhile, was holding court with a clique of socialites, her laughter just a little too loud, her hand gestures a little too broad. The necklace on her throat was acting as a beacon. "It's divine, Chloe," said a woman whose face was a testament to expensive dermatology. "Is it an antique?" "Oh, this old thing?" Chloe trilled, touching the central sapphire. "Damien had it made. He calls it the Vance Star. He says it's the new family jewel for the new family." The dig was clear, and it landed. The whispers began. "That's the necklace Daisy's grandmother used to wear. Did he really? How tacky." Damien ignored them. He was on the hunt for the Forbes journalist, Jonathan Pike, who was penning the cover story. He found him by the bar. "Damien, the man of the hour," Jonathan said, shaking his hand. "Jonathan, good to see you. I hope you're getting everything you need for the piece." "Almost," Jonathan said, his reporter's eyes glinting. "Just one question I need to clear up. There's been some market chatter, rumors about the financing of the Apex deal. Some analysts are saying you over-leveraged the company, that you diluted your own stock to the point of vulnerability." Damien's smile tightened. He hated analysts. They were ants, picking at the scraps of a lion's meal. "Vulnerability is for the weak, Jonathan. I didn't dilute my stock. I consolidated my power. I traded paper for a future-proof AI. Vance Innovations is now untouchable. This merger wasn't a purchase. It was a conquest. In 5 years, people won't be talking about Google or Apple. They'll be talking about Vance." "And Daisy, your ex-wife? No comment from her side on the divorce, or her stake in the company?" Damien let out a sigh, a performance of practiced weariness. "Look, Jonathan, I have nothing but respect for Daisy. But she's a traditionalist. She was risk-averse. She was happy with a simple life. I'm not. I'm built for more. I gave her a very, very generous exit package. She's comfortable, she'll be fine. But Vance Innovations needed to be unshackled. Now it is. Tonight is the proof. So you're the sole, undisputed owner." 100%, Damien lied, the champagne tasting sweet. "The king, the castle, the keys, all of it." He clapped Jonathan on the shoulder, feeling the satisfying glow of his own mythology settling into fact. He turned back to the room, scanning for Chloe. He saw her near the grand staircase, laughing, the blue of the sapphires winking at him from across the room. He felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. The music, a string quartet playing something by Vivaldi, seemed to dip in volume. The chatter in the room faded. A man at the entrance, the Gala's lead coordinator, was speaking into his headset, his back rigid. Then, the music stopped completely. The silence was deafening. Every head in the room turned toward the grand entrance. This was an unscheduled pause. This was not part of the program. The head coordinator stepped up to the microphone, his voice amplified, sounding nervous. "Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the interruption. We have a a late arrival, a truly honored guest who has graced us with his presence tonight. Please welcome the chairman of Pendleton Global Holdings, Mr. Arthur Pendleton. Damien Vance's blood turned to ice water. Arthur Pendleton? Here? He never came to anything. He was a phantom, a myth. Damien hadn't seen him in person since the divorce mediation, where Arthur had simply sat in the back, staring at him, not saying a single word. A ripple of genuine shock passed through the crowd. This was like the Pope showing up at a nightclub. Damien felt a prickle of sweat on his neck. Why is he here? Chloe, oblivious, slid up next to him. Who's Arthur Pendleton? He sounds important. Should we go say hi? He's Daisy's father, Damien managed to say, his throat dry. Oh, Chloe said, her face pinching. Her father? How dreadfully boring. Well, let's just avoid them. And, the coordinator at the microphone added, his voice gaining a new strength, accompanying her father. Please welcome Miss Daisy Hayes. The doors opened. It wasn't just an entrance. It was a paradigm shift. Damien's stomach dropped. Daisy Hayes walked in on her father's arm. She wasn't the mousy, tear-stained woman he'd left. She wasn't the footnote. She was wearing a dress that seemed to drink the light in the room, her expression serene, powerful, and utterly devoid of the sadness he'd expected. She looked, he realized with a jolt of pure panic, exactly like her father. She looked like she owned the place. The crowd didn't just whisper, they gasped. This wasn't the reclusive, forgotten ex-wife. This was a statement. Daisy's eyes scanned the room, coolly, clinically. They passed over the board members, over the press, over Chloe, and then they landed on him. She didn't smile, she didn't scowl, she just saw him. And in that one, terrifying, assessing look, Damien Vance knew, with the certainty of a man on a gallows, that he had made a terrible, terrible mistake. The ballroom was a frozen tableau. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound was the distant clatter of a plate in the kitchen. Damien felt his heart hammering against his ribs, a frantic bird in a cage that was rapidly shrinking. This is a power play, he told himself. She's here to make a scene, to try and embarrass me. He just had to get the upper hand, control the narrative. He straightened his tie, grabbing Chloe's hand. Come on, he hissed. We go to them. We welcome them. We're the bigger people. We're gracious. Damien, I don't, Chloe began, her confidence suddenly evaporating. The woman at the door looked nothing like the sad, boring wife Damien had described. Now, Chloe. He dragged her through the parting sea of onlookers. The whispers followed them. That's him. With the Mistress. And that's her necklace. Damien plastered his best politician's smile onto his face. He reached Daisy and Arthur, who had stopped just inside the ballroom, observing the room with the detached calm of inspectors. Daisy, Arthur, what a wonderful surprise, Damien said, his voice a strained imitation of pleasantry. I had no idea you were supporters of the Legacy Fund. Arthur Pendleton looked at Damien. He didn't blink. His eyes were pale grey, like a winter's sky, and just as cold. He said nothing. Daisy, however, did. Hello, Damien. Her voice was clear and cool, with no trace of the tremble he remembered. It was the voice of a CEO, not a victim. We're not supporters. We're the new underwriters. The fund was undercapitalized. We corrected that. Damien's smile faltered. Underwriters? That's magnificent. A $50 million pledge, I heard. A $150 million pledge, Daisy corrected him gently. But this isn't the place for business. We're here to celebrate. Oh, wonderful, Chloe chirped, sensing an opening to re-establish her dominance. She thrust her hand forward, the Bulgari box's contents flashing. "Hi, I'm Chloe Jenkins. I'm sure you've heard all about me. It's just such an honor to finally meet you, Mr. Pendleton." Arthur Pendleton's gaze drifted from Damien's face, down to Chloe's outstretched hand, and then to the necklace. His expression didn't change, but the temperature around him dropped 10 degrees. He did not take her hand. He simply looked back at Damien. Chloe, humiliated, let her hand fall, her face flushing crimson. "Mr. Vance," Arthur said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the residual murmur of the room. People nearby strained to listen. "Yes, Arthur," Damien tried, aiming for familiarity. "We need to discuss your merger," Arthur said. Damien's panic spiked. "Here? Now? I think—" "Here and now," Arthur affirmed. "You seem to be celebrating. I'm curious what, precisely, you believe you've accomplished." "I've accomplished the Apex deal," Damien said, puffing his chest, trying to reclaim his authority. "I've secured the future of Vance Innovations. As I was just telling Forbes, it's the acquisition of the decade." "Is it?" Arthur asked, with the mild curiosity of a man asking about the weather. "The acquisition of Apex Dynamics, a fascinating company. Their AI platform is revolutionary." "It is," Damien agreed, nodding. "It's going to triple our valuation." "It might," Arthur agreed, "but there seems to be a slight confusion of terms. You see, Mr. Vance, you didn't acquire Apex Dynamics." Damien's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about? The papers were signed. The deal is closed." "Oh, the deal is most certainly closed," Arthur said. "But you were the one who was acquired. Apex Dynamics, which has been a quiet subsidiary of Pendleton Global for 2 years, just finalized its purchase of a 51% controlling stake in Vance Innovations." The silence in the room was now absolute. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth. Damien stared, uncomprehending. That's not possible. That's insane. I am the majority shareholder. I control the board." "You were," Daisy said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was devastatingly calm. "Until 5 p.m. today. When you, Damien, in your infinite wisdom, personally signed away your controlling interest. You traded 51% of your company for a piece of technology that, as it turns out, we already owned." Damien's world tilted. He shook his head, a frantic, jerky motion. No, the shares, the valuation. You leveraged everything, Damien," Daisy continued, as if explaining a simple math problem to a child. "You took out loans against your personal shares to buy out my minority stake in the divorce. You were left with a razor-thin majority. You were desperate for a big win to placate the new creditors. You found Apex. You thought it was a sleeping giant. You didn't do your due diligence. You never once asked who the principal owners of Apex were. Damien was sputtering, his face pale and slick with sweat. You tricked me. This is illegal. This is market manipulation. Is it?" Arthur cut in. "We put a company up for sale. You made an offer. We accepted. You were so eager to close the deal, you didn't even let your lawyers read the full prospectus. You just signed. We have your signature, Mr. Vance. On every single page." Damien looked wildly around. He saw Michael Sterling, his rival, who was now staring at his shoes. He saw Jonathan Pike, the Forbes reporter, who was scribbling furiously in a small notebook. He was in a box, a trap, and he had just walked into it and locked the door behind him. "But why?" he whispered, his bravado shattering, revealing the terrified small man beneath. "The company. It was my life." "No," Daisy said. And now, for the first time, her voice held a white-hot spark of anger. It was my life. It was my money. And you took it. You took it, and you used it to destroy me. This was the second blow, and it was the one that would end him. Damien's mind was a whirlwind. He couldn't process the words. Your money? What are you talking about? I paid you out. I gave you a fortune. Daisy actually laughed. It wasn't a sound of mirth. It was a cold, sharp sound, like glass breaking. You gave me? She repeated. Damien, you've been living in a fantasy. You never had any money. You were a broke engineer with a good idea and a terrible credit score when I met you. I built this company from scratch. He roared, his voice cracking. The room was hissing with whispers. This was better than any Broadway show. Let's be precise, Daisy said, taking a small step closer. He flinched. You had an idea. I had $20 million, or the $20 million you told everyone was a gift from my trust fund. The handout you were so quick to take, and even quicker to forget. It was a gift, he insisted, desperate now. A wife supporting her husband. It was an investment, Damien, Daisy stated, her voice resonating with absolute authority. It was the seed capital from Hayes Pendleton Strategic Ventures, a company I founded, and I am the sole director of. You signed an ironclad 80-page investment agreement. You just never bothered to read it. You were too busy practicing your future CEO signature. Damien's memory flashed back. 10 years ago. A mahogany-panelled office. Daisy looking young and hopeful, her father looking skeptical. A mountain of paperwork. He had been eager. He'd barely skimmed it. He saw the wire transfer confirmation and signed where Daisy's lawyer had pointed. The agreement was simple, Daisy continued, her voice dissecting him, layer by layer. You were given the title of CEO. You were given a generous salary. You were given operational control, but the primary investor, me, retained the majority of the actual assets secured against the company's performance and your personal conduct. Personal conduct, Damien whispered. The metallic taste of doom filled his mouth. Clause 12B, Damien, Daisy said. The Pendleton Morality Clause, a standard feature in all our personal contracts. It states that in the event of gross personal misconduct, specifically, actions that bring public disrepute or marital infidelity, all assets and shares immediately revert to the primary investor. The note becomes due, in full, instantly. He stared at her. Adultery. You're ruining me. Over adultery. No, Damien, Daisy said, her eyes flashing. I'm not ruining you over adultery. I'm repossessing my property because of your theft. You didn't just cheat on me. You did it with an employee. You used my company's funds to pay her, to buy her gifts. You flaunted her. You publicly humiliated me. You broke the contract. You broke it into 1,000 pieces. The merger. It wasn't the cause of his downfall. It was just the method. When you filed for divorce, Daisy explained, you triggered the clause. We could have taken everything then. But my father, he's a tidy man. He doesn't like loose ends. And you, Damien, were a very large, very arrogant loose end. Why just fire the CEO when we could have him fire himself? Arthur spoke again. We let you think you'd won. We let you buy her out. Which was, by the way, just you moving our money from one of our accounts to another. We watched you leverage yourself to the hilt. And then we dangled the shiniest toy we could find, Apex Dynamics. And you, like the greedy, short-sighted man you are, jumped at it. You just handed us the keys, Damien, all to prove you were a king. Damien was no longer standing. He had, without realizing it, sunk against a nearby marble pillar. He was hyperventilating. His entire life. His entire life. It was all a lie. He wasn't the visionary. He was the help. He looked at Chloe. She was staring at him, her face a mask of pale horror. The blood had drained from her face, leaving her makeup looking Samuel. Like a clown's. "You," she stammered, looking at Damien. "You told me. You said I was—" She looked at Daisy, then at the necklace, her hands flying to her throat as if she'd just realized it was a snake. Daisy's gaze followed hers. Her face, which had been a mask of cold fury, softened into something else. Pity. "Oh, Chloe," Daisy said, her voice almost gentle. "He lied to you too. He said this was—" Chloe's voice was a tiny squeak. "The Vance star?" Daisy said. "No, dear. That's the Persephone sapphire. It belonged to my grandmother, Althea Pendleton. It was her wedding gift from my grandfather. It's been in my family for 90 years. It was listed as stolen from my vault 2 months ago, right after Damien moved out." Chloe's hand scrambled at the clasp, her fingers fumbling. No, I didn't know. He told me he had it made for me." "I'm sure he did," Daisy said. She nodded to a man in a black suit who had appeared silently at her father's side. "This is Mr. Harrison, our head of security. He'll be taking the necklace back." "Take it! Take it!" Chloe shrieked, finally ripping the clasp open. The priceless heirloom fell into her hands, and she shoved it at the security man as if it were burning her. "I never wanted it. I didn't know." She turned on Damien, her face contorted with a rage that eclipsed his own. "You liar! You used me! You ruined me! You told me you were the boss! You told me we were a dynasty! You're nothing! You're a fraud!" She didn't wait for an answer. With a sob that was half rage, half panic, Chloe Jenkins gathered her crimson dress and fled, pushing through the stunned crowd and disappearing out the main doors. Damien Vance was left alone, slumped against the pillar. The king of fools. Damien didn't move. He couldn't. His limbs felt heavy, his suit suddenly a lead shroud. The silence in the ballroom was now filled with the sound of his own ragged breathing. Every eye was on him. Not with sympathy, not even with pity. It was the detached, voracious curiosity of a crowd watching a public execution. Arthur Pendleton checked his watch. "Well, I believe our business here is concluded. Mr. Vance, as of this moment, you are officially terminated as CEO of Vance Innovations, which is now a wholly owned subsidiary of the Pendleton Global Group. Your email has been deactivated, your access to all company property revoked. Mr. Harrison and his team will escort you from the premises. 2 more men, built like mountains and dressed in the same immaculate black suits, materialized on either side of Damien. You can't," Damien whispered, his last ember of defiance. The board won't stand for this." "The board?" Arthur repeated. "Michael Sterling. He's been on my payroll for 3 years. Sarah Jenkins, her father and I went to Yale. The entire board, Mr. Vance, was aware of this transition. They are, in fact, waiting for Daisy in the private dining room upstairs to welcome their new chairwoman." The ultimate betrayal. They all knew. They had all watched him walk into the gala, watched him preen and boast, knowing this was his last night. "Daisy," he pleaded, turning to his ex-wife. His voice was broken. This was the man she'd once loved, now reduced to a begging child. "Daisy, please, after all we had, don't do this. Don't take everything." Daisy looked at him for a long, quiet moment. The anger was gone. The pity was gone. All that was left was a profound, chilling emptiness. Everything? What exactly am I taking, Damien? The company was mine. The money was mine. The house you live in. It's in my father's name. The car you drive? It's leased by my holding company. The Vance star you so generously gifted to your mistress? My grandmother's." She took a step closer, and for the first time, she lowered her voice so only he could hear. "You came into this marriage with nothing but a cheap suit and a load of ambition. I am simply returning you to your original state. You didn't just cheat, Damien. You erased me. You told me I was a footnote. You told me I was holding you back. You told me I was nothing." She leaned in, her voice a razor's edge. "Who's nothing now?" One of the security men gently took Damien's arm. "Mr. Vance, this way, please." The touch broke his paralysis. He lashed out, shoving the man's hand away. "Get off me! Get your hands off me! You can't do this! I am Damien Vance!" His shout echoed in the vast, silent room. It was the desperate roar of a dethroned animal. "Mr. Vance, we can do this quietly, or we can do this publicly. It makes no difference to us," Mr. Harrison said, his voice flat. Damien looked around, his eyes wild. He saw the Forbes reporter, Jonathan Pike, his face a mixture of shock and professional ecstasy. This was the story of a lifetime. He saw the socialites, their phones half hidden, undoubtedly recording. It was over. He deflated. The rage, the panic, the fight, it all drained out of him, leaving an empty, shaking husk. "Quietly," he whispered. "Please." "Very good, sir." The two men flanked him, each taking an elbow. They didn't drag him, they simply walked him. Past the crowd, past the bar where he'd proclaimed himself king, past the grand staircase, and out the main doors, through a service exit to avoid the press. Damien Vance, the visionary, the conqueror, was escorted out of his own life like a common trespasser. As the doors swung shut behind him, a smattering of applause broke out. It was hesitant at first, then grew. Daisy Hayes stood tall, her father by her side. She did not smile. She simply nodded, a queen accepting her throne. The gala coordinator, who had been watching from the wings, hurried back to the microphone, his face flushed with excitement. Ladies and gentlemen, an unexpected change in our program. Please join me in welcoming the true benefactor of this evening's gala, and the new chairwoman of Vance. Apologies. The new chairwoman of Pendleton Hayes Innovations, Ms. Daisy Hayes. The ballroom erupted. This wasn't just a takeover, it was a restoration. The room flooded with people congratulating her, shaking her father's hand. Arthur Pendleton leaned in, his voice for her ears only. "Are you all right, my dear?" Daisy watched the spot where Damien had stood. He said I was a footnote," she whispered. "And what are you now?" Arthur asked. Daisy turned to her father, and for the first time that night, a slow, genuine smile spread across her face. "I'm the author, and I've just written the ending." She took her father's arm, and together they walked into the room that was, finally and truly, hers. The dawn broke over Manhattan with a merciless, surgical precision. It wasn't a gentle sunrise, it was an interrogation light. By 6 a.m., the story was not just breaking, it was a global tsunami. It wasn't confined to the gossip columns. This was front page, above the fold news on the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times. The Forbes cover, the one Damien had preened for, was indeed scrapped. In its place, a stark black and white photo of him from the gala, captured mid-sneer, was slapped on a hastily redesigned cover. The headline, which Jonathan Pike had reportedly written with venomous glee, was devastating. "The King of Nothing. How Damien Vance built a $10 billion empire on a lie." The article was a masterful vivisection, detailing the entire scheme, from the morality clause to the apex dynamics trap. It named Daisy Hayes not as the victim, but as the architect. Page 6 was, naturally, more brutal. It ran the side-by-side that would become an internet meme before noon. Chloe in her crimson dress, hand on the stolen sapphire, looking brassy and triumphant. Beside it, a 1960s Vogue portrait of Althea Pendleton, the very image of Samuel-tocratic grace, wearing the same necklace. The headline was a masterpiece of tabloid genius, Trash and Heirloom. On CNBC's Squawk Box, analysts were apoplectic, not at Daisy, but at Damien. "This isn't just infidelity, Joe," one analyst barked. "This is catastrophic corporate malfeasance. He didn't just cheat on his wife, he cheated on his shareholders. He traded 51% of his company for a piece of tech he didn't even vet. He was a fool, a fool." Damien Vance knew none of this. Not yet. He had spent the night walking, his mind a howling void. After being deposited on the curb by Daisy's silent, implacable security, he had simply walked. The city he'd seen as his kingdom was now a cold, alien landscape. At 6:30 a.m., running on pure, toxic adrenaline, he stumbled back to the penthouse. He needed his laptop, his files, his life. He tried to push through the revolving brass door. A hand, firm and unyielding, stopped him. It was Frank, the doorman, a man who had accepted $1,000 Christmas tips from him for 5 years. "Mr. Vance?" Frank said. His face was perfectly, infuriatingly neutral. "I'm afraid I can't let you up." "Frank, what the hell are you talking about? It's me." "Move." Damien slurred, his tuxedo rumpled, his hair matted with sweat. "My apologies, sir," Frank said, stepping directly in his path. "We received a directive from building management at 10:45 p.m. last night. You are no longer on the residence list. You are not permitted entry." That's ridiculous." Damien fumbled in his pocket for his key fob. "I own this apartment." "The penthouse, sir, is owned by a Pendleton Global Holding Company. Your lease was terminated, effective immediately, as per the directive. If you do not move, sir, I will have to call the police." Damien stared at the man. He looked at his own hand, holding the useless fob. He looked up at the 88th floor, a place that was, just 12 hours ago, his fortress. He was, quite literally, locked out. He stumbled back onto the sidewalk as the first few drops of a cold, miserable rain began to fall. He pulled out his phone to call his lawyer, his real lawyer, not the corporate yes-men. Service deactivated. He tried to open his banking app. Invalid credentials. He tried to call an Uber. Payment method declined. Daisy hadn't just taken the company. She had taken him. She had unplugged him from the matrix he thought he'd built. A taxi screeched to a halt beside him. The back door flew open, and Chloe Jenkins spilled out, looking even worse than he did. Her crimson dress was torn at the hem, her makeup a tragic watercolor of mascara and tears. "You!" she shrieked, pointing a finger at him. "You ruined me!" "Chloe, get a grip! A grip!" she screamed, and she slapped him. The sound was sharp and pathetic in the morning traffic. "I've been fired! My corporate apartment! Gone! They had security escort me out like a criminal! And my name is everywhere! They're calling me a sapphire strumpet! Online! You told me I was the future! You told me I was the queen! I will fix this," Damien stammered, holding his stinging cheek. This is a misunderstanding. It's illegal. I'll sue." "Sue? Sue with what?" Chloe laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "You don't have anything. You never did. You're a ghost, a con man in a nice suit. You used me. You put that thing on my neck and you let me walk in there. You let them laugh at me." "I didn't know," he roared, the first real sound of his own despair. "That's the problem," she cried. "You never knew. You were too stupid and too arrogant to ever look." She saw the open cab, her escape. She scrambled back in, pulling the door shut. I hope she destroys you, Damien. I hope you end up exactly where you started, with nothing." The taxi sped off, spraying him with a plume of dirty gutter water. Damien Vance, the king of nothing, stood alone, soaked to the bone, as the city he'd tried to conquer woke up to read about his spectacular and very public death. 3 miles away, Daisy Hayes stepped out of her towned car. The morning was crisp, bright, and cold. The rain hadn't dared to touch this part of the city. She was not wearing a gown. She was clad in a razor-sharp, dark teal suit, her hair pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. She looked less like a socialite and more like a general. She had arrived at 7:00 a.m. The building was already a hive of activity. A massive crane was parked on the sidewalk, and workmen were carefully, meticulously, removing the large Ig Samuelsh Vance Innovations letters from the building's facade. The sound of metal grinding against stone was the only sound on the block. As she walked toward the lobby, a new, polished silver letter P was being hoisted into place. Pendleton Hayes Innovations. She had insisted on her own names being added. This was not just her father's company. This was hers, the security guards in the lobby, the same ones who used to offer her a polite, dismissive, "Good morning, Mrs. Vance," snapped to attention. "Good morning, Miss Hayes," the head of security said, his voice ringing with a newfound respect. "Good morning, Thomas." She walked to the private elevator, the one that had required Damien's thumbprint. Mr. Harrison, her father's man, had already had it recalibrated. It opened for her. She rode it to the top floor. Her floor. The double doors to the CEO's office whispered open. The room was exactly as he'd left it. The scent of his obnoxiously expensive Tom Ford cologne still hung in the air. The massive black granite desk. The row of tacky, self-congratulatory Titan of Tech awards. And on the wall, the framed Fortune magazine profile. The man who tamed Silicon Alley. Daisy walked to the window, the same one Damien had stood at 24 hours prior. The view was, as always, magnificent. She had always loved this view. He had thought she was just admiring the scenery. She'd been calculating the property taxes. Michael Sterling knocked and entered, holding a tablet. "Good morning, Madam Chairwoman. The board is assembled in the main conference room. The transition is complete. All assets are secure." "Thank you, Michael," Daisy said, not turning from the window. "First, the audit. Already underway?" "No," Daisy said, turning. Her eyes were ice. "Not a standard audit, a forensic one. I want to know about every $10,000 consulting fee to a model. I want to see every discretionary bonus he gave to Ms. Jenkins. I want a receipt for every dinner at Per Se, every private jet, every bottle of champagne. He used this company as his personal piggy bank. That vault is now closed." "Understood." "Second," Daisy continued, walking the perimeter of the room, R&D. He was spending 25% of our net profit on public relations and 5% on research and development. We're flipping that, effective immediately. Our engineers have been begging for resources. I want you to give them an unlimited budget for 48 hours. I want to know what they can really do now that they're unshackled, as he would say. A flicker of a smile played on Michael's lips. "They will be very pleased, Mum. And finally, Chloe Jenkins." Michael's face grew somber. "She was escorted from her company apartment this morning. She's been calling, demanding. She's fired. For cause," Daisy said flatly. "But I'm not Damien. Have legal draft a separation agreement. It will be generous. More generous than she deserves. 6 months' salary. But the non-disclosure agreement attached to it will be global, permanent, and non-negotiable. If she so much as thinks about writing a tell-all or speaking to a reporter, we will own her. She was a fool, but he made her one. Let's just make her disappear quietly. Very good, Miss Hayes. And the final matter. Mr. Vance? Daisy was silent for a long moment. She walked to his desk. She picked up the framed fortune profile, looked at his smiling, arrogant face, and then, with a quiet thud, dropped it into the wastebasket. My father, she said, wants him in prison for the theft of the Persephone sapphire. It's an open and shut case. Grand larceny. And you? Michael asked. Prison is too simple, Daisy said. It makes him a martyr. It gives him a new story to tell. I don't want to make him a martyr, Michael. I want to make him irrelevant. She sat down in the large leather CEO's chair. It wasn't just comfortable. It felt right. So here is the offer you will have our lawyers send to, wherever he is. We will drop all criminal charges. In exchange, he will sign 2 documents. First, a full, notarized confession of his financial malfeasance and the theft, to be held in escrow by my father's legal team. A get-out-of-jail card that we hold for the rest of his life. Second, a non-compete so broad and a gag order so total that he will never be able to use the name Vance in a business context again. He can't work in tech. He can't work in finance. He can't consult. He can't write a book. He can't give an interview. He is, in effect, erased from the industry he claimed to build. He'll be nothing, Michael said, the weight of it sinking in. He'll be exactly what he was when I found him, Daisy corrected. He's free to be exactly who he's always been, a man with a cheap suit and a load of ambition, just without me to fund his dreams. It will be done, Miss Hayes. Michael left, closing the doors quietly behind him. Daisy was alone. She looked at the city, her city. She had never wanted this. She had been happy to be the supportive wife, the quiet investor, the footnote. Damien had been right. She had been holding herself back, hiding her acumen to protect his fragile ego. In his quest to destroy her, he had given her the one thing she never knew she needed. He had given her herself. Daisy Hayes, the chairwoman of Pendleton Hayes Innovations, swiveled in her new chair to face her new life. She buzzed her new executive assistant. Yes, Miss Hayes? Get me Dr. Samuel Croft, the head of R&D, Daisy said, her voice clear and vibrating with command. And clear my schedule for the rest of the day. We have work to do. And just like that, the empire built on lies collapsed. Damien Vance learned the hard way that you should never, ever underestimate the person you cast aside. He didn't just lose his job, he lost his identity, all because he was blinded by his own arrogance. Daisy Hayes, on the other hand, didn't just reclaim her money. She reclaimed her name, her power, and her future, proving that the best revenge isn't just living well, it's taking back everything. What do you think of Daisy's plan? Was it a masterpiece of justice, or a revenge served too cold? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. This story is a powerful reminder that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. If you loved this drama, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring that bell. You won't want to miss the next story we uncover.